My name's Raimi Carter. I'm 22, and until 6 months ago, I thought I came from a perfectly boring, middle-class family in Madison, Wisconsin. You know the type: white picket fence, PTA meetings, awkward holiday cards. We weren't rich, but we were presentable. We passed for functional. Until I opened that door. Let me back up. It was winter break, and I'd just gotten back from campus. Finals had chewed me up, and all I wanted was to crash in my old bed with the lavender candle I'd left behind last summer. No drama, no surprises, just familiar walls and silence. When I pulled up to our house around 11 p.m., the porch light was on, and my parents opened the door like everything was completely normal. "Hi, sweetheart," Mom said, smiling like she hadn't forgotten my birthday 2 weeks ago. "Need help with that?" Dad joked, nodding at my suitcase like it weighed a ton. I forced a chuckle and stepped inside. It smelled like fresh detergent and whatever generic candle they were into now. That fake vanilla woodsy blend. Nothing felt off. But maybe that was the first red flag. I told them, I'm just going to drop my bag in my room, without even thinking. Just a habit. That's when Mom cut in. "Too fast. Don't go in there." Dad followed. "Too calm. It's just storage now." I paused. That room, my room, was the only place in that house that ever felt like mine. And suddenly, it was off limits. They brushed it off like it was no big deal. "You'll sleep in the guest room this time," Mom said, already turning down the hallway like this conversation never happened. I didn't argue. Not then, not yet. The guest room was awful. Folded couch. Weird sour odor. No pillow, no lamp. It felt like being demoted. And the way the springs groaned under me, it was like the room itself was rejecting me. "You okay in here?" Mom peeked in. "Yeah," I lied. That night, we had a quiet dinner, like eerily quiet. Dad complained about gas prices. Mom laughed at something no one said. They asked about school. I answered, all of us pretending like we were a family still. But the knot in my stomach said otherwise. I tried to sleep, but the couch pressed against my spine like punishment. And there was this sound, something in the wall, maybe pipes, maybe something alive. But mostly, it was that door I couldn't stop thinking about. Why was it locked? Why now? And what could possibly be in there? Around midnight, I got up. I didn't check the time, I just moved, like something inside me had already decided. The hallway was dim and cold. My bare feet made no sound on the wood floor. I passed Mom and Dad's room. Their door was closed. No lights. But the boxes that had been stacked in front of my bedroom door earlier, gone. Just gone. My pulse picked up. I reached for the handle. Locked. My old bedroom never had a lock, not once, not even when I begged for one in high school. I stood there, staring, fighting the burn in my throat. Then I remembered the hiding spot. Behind the laundry shelf, a narrow panel in the wall. They used to keep spare keys there, taped behind the wood. My childhood was full of secrets hidden in plain sight. I tiptoed down the back hallway, hands shaking just enough to notice. And there it was. A new, shiny key taped exactly where I remembered. Someone had placed it there recently. I stared at it, fingers hovering. I could have walked away, pretended I didn't see it. But I didn't. I went back, slid the key into the lock, and clicked it open. Immediately, the smell hit me: dust, wood polish, and something else, something stale, like the air hadn't moved in weeks. I stepped inside, and I froze. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't boxes of winter coats or old furniture like they'd said. It was the exact thing I hoped I was wrong about. Instrument cases, all of them, stacked neatly, carefully, under a gray tarp. Violins, a cello case, a mandolin that still had Grandma's initials etched into the leather. The missing collection. The one my parents reported stolen. The one that supposedly vanished the night Grandma went to the ER. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just backed out slowly, hands trembling, closed the door behind me, and dialed 911. The dispatcher asked if it was an emergency. I think there's been insurance fraud, I whispered, and maybe elder abuse. She didn't even pause. Help is on the way, she said. I didn't knock on my parents' door. I didn't explain. I just stepped outside into the cold, my breath visible in the porch light, and waited beside the mailbox, my jacket half-zipped, my phone screen cracked and flickering, but still glowing with that one word. Connected. And as the wind picked up, my eyes fixed on the house I grew up in. From the outside, it looked perfectly normal. Just like always. But that was the problem, wasn't it? Normal can lie. And I had just peeled back its skin. The patrol car pulled up 28 minutes after I made the call. I counted. Not because I was impatient, but because every second outside that house felt like holding my breath underwater. The engine was soft, headlights off. 2 officers stepped out, one older, calm-eyed, the other younger, scanning everything. Neither seemed surprised to find a college kid standing in the cold at 1 a.m., gripping her phone like it was a lifeline. You the one who called? The older officer asked. I nodded. Yes, sir. Ramey Carter. He looked at me, then at the house. Everything quiet inside. Too quiet, I said. They didn't laugh. I told them everything calmly, clearly. About the instruments, about the so-called break-in, about Grandma Rose, about the insurance claim. I felt like I was reading a statement in court, not telling a story, but I couldn't afford to get emotional. Not now, not when truth was on my side. The younger officer asked gently, "Do you want to remain anonymous?" I shook my head. No, I don't care anymore. They exchanged a quick look, like they'd heard that before. One officer stayed with me by the curb. The other approached the house and rang the doorbell. The porch light flicked on. First, a silhouette appeared upstairs, then another in the hallway. Finally, the front door opened. Dad stood there in sweatpants and a crumpled t-shirt, hair sticking out on one side. His face wasn't panicked, just confused, like he'd just woken up from a dream where nothing made sense. Mom appeared behind him, tugging on a cardigan. Her eyes met the officer's, then flicked toward me, standing in the dark. She didn't say anything. Not then. The officer kept his voice low. I couldn't hear what was said, but I didn't need to. From where I stood, I could see something shift in her face. The way her jaw tensed. The way her hand gripped the edge of the door just a little tighter. I had never seen my mother look at me like that. Not disappointed, not angry. Exposed. Eventually, both officers entered. The door shut behind them. I stood outside, hugging myself, trying to stay warm. I thought of Grandma alone in a hospital bed with tubes in her arm, believing her life's legacy had been stolen by strangers. And all this time, it had been locked in a room 2 doors down from the kitchen. I stared at that house. I used to know every inch of it, every creak in the floor, every crack in the ceiling paint. But right then, it felt like a stranger's house, a stage set pretending to be a home. 20 minutes later, a second vehicle pulled up. Bigger. No sirens, just a low engine hum and the crunch of tires on curbside gravel. 2 more officers got out. This team had gloves, clipboards, storage cases lined with felt. Evidence collection. They entered without a word, after a brief exchange with the first pair. A few minutes passed. Then the front door opened again. One officer walked out, carefully carrying a cello case. I recognized it immediately. The faded green velvet lining. The brass buckle that stuck on one side. My grandma had called it her river spine because of the way it curved like flowing water. Behind him came another, Then another, violin, mandolin, flute, all intact. They weren't just boxes, they were testimony. And then Mom stepped outside. She didn't say anything. She scanned the yard. Her eyes passed over me, then stopped. She didn't cry, didn't plead, just stared. And in her stare, I saw it betrayal, not of her, of me. Like I had crossed the line, like I had burned the family down. Behind her, Dad appeared, rubbing his temples like he was getting a migraine from the consequences of his own lies. They didn't speak, but I didn't look away. I held their gaze stone silent as each instrument was carried past them, like a procession of ghosts. Eventually, one of the officers returned to me. "We've cataloged everything," he said, "wrapping up now." I nodded. My bag's still inside. I don't want to go in alone. "Of course," he said, and walked with me to the door. Inside, nothing had changed. Same hallway, same scent of detergent and stale lavender, same stillness, except now it wasn't peaceful. It was surgical. My bag was already packed, sitting by the guest room couch like someone hoped I'd leave without needing to speak again. As I passed the hallway, my parents were just standing there, watching, still silent, still pretending they had no part in this. I didn't look at them. I didn't need to. Outside, the last instrument case was being loaded into the second vehicle. "Clipboard, signature, door shut." It was done. "Do you have somewhere to stay tonight?" the officer asked. "No," I said, "but can you take me to the hospital?" He gave me a small nod. "Of course." I climbed into the back seat and shut the door. As we pulled away from the house, I didn't glance back, not once. I didn't need to. What was behind me was already lost. What mattered was who was still breathing, and what I'd say to her when I walked into that hospital room. The hospital smelled like bleach and overcooked coffee. I'd been there before, of course, flu seasons, sprained wrists, visiting Grandma when she had that scare a few years back. But this time, everything felt heavier. The lobby lights buzzed too loud. The floor tiles were too clean. Even the air felt like it was waiting for me to say something I didn't want to say. The officer walked me to the desk, said something to the nurse, and then turned to me. "She's still up on 3C, the nurse said, voice soft, room 312. I thanked them both and took the elevator alone. My bag was still slung over my shoulder, pressing into my ribs. I hadn't even changed clothes. Just jeans and a hoodie that smelled faintly like home. I hated that it still did. The doors opened. The hallway was quiet except for the soft beep of machines and the distant squeak of rubber soles on tile. When I stepped into Grandma's room, she was awake. Wiry white hair against the pillow, thin hands folded on top of the blanket. Her eyes, still sharp despite everything, met mine. And then she smiled. Like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just burned my family to the ground. I sat beside her and reached for her hand. Her fingers were cool but steady. "They found the instruments," I whispered. She closed her eyes for a moment, exhaled long and slow. "Thank God." I didn't tell her where they were found. Didn't say who took them. Didn't explain the locked room, the tarp, the lies. I just said, "They're safe now." And that was enough for her. She gave my hand a small squeeze. "I wanted you to have them," she said. "That was always the point." "I know." She leaned back against the pillow and said nothing more. A nurse came in not long after, checked her vitals, adjusted a monitor. "If she stays calm," she said to me gently, "she'll recover." I nodded, my throat too tight to answer. Around 7:30 a.m., I stepped outside the hospital for air. The sky was pale and washed out, like it hadn't decided whether to be cloudy or clear. The cold cut right through my sleeves, but I didn't move. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. 47 missed calls. 12 voicemails, and still counting. Mom, Dad, Vivian, over and over again. While I stared at the screen, it lit up again. Mom calling. I answered. Her voice exploded through the speaker loud, furious, desperate. How could you do this to us? I said nothing. You called the police. You embarrassed your own parents. Do you have any idea what you've done? You hid the collection, I said quietly. You told Grandma it was gone. You filed a false insurance claim. She's fine, Dad's voice cut in. She didn't die. She could have. Silence. Then Mom again, her voice trembling now. We're your family, Raimi. You don't treat family this way. You don't do this to your grandmother. You've never been grateful, always acting like a victim, always twisting things. I'm not the victim, I said. She is. There was a long pause. Then came the line that should have hurt more than it did. You're not our daughter anymore. I didn't respond. Then I heard Dad mutter something under his breath. She's old anyway. It slipped out too loud, too clear. He didn't mean to say it. But he did. And something in me broke. Or maybe it finally went quiet. You were waiting for her to die, I said flatly. That's what this was about. Neither of them denied it. I hung up. Blocked both their numbers. I was shaking, not with anger, with something colder. I sat down on a bench outside the hospital, just breathing, just existing. And then, like the universe couldn't resist one last kick, my phone buzzed again. Vivian. I stared at the screen. For a second, I thought about letting it go to voicemail. But I picked up. Her voice was different, like she was trying to sound calm and failing. I heard what you did, she said. I did what was right. You called the cops. On our parents. They committed insurance fraud. They lied to Grandma. They almost killed her. Oh, come on, she scoffed. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. We just needed the money, she said, sharper now. It's not like anyone got hurt. Grandma got hurt. She's old, Vivian snapped. There it is again. You're really going to throw away the whole family over this. I didn't answer. Raimi, you've always been dramatic. You act like the world's out to get you. I ended the call. Blocked her, too. Then I just sat there, no more ringing, no more buzzing. No more family. No more noise. Just air. I didn't cry, didn't break down, didn't feel strong or brave. I just felt finished. They made their choices. And so did I. I didn't leave the hospital that day. Grandma slept most of the morning light, restless naps broken by murmurs and machines. I stayed in the chair by her bed, legs curled up, hoodie wrapped tight around me like armor. At some point, a nurse brought me a granola bar and a cup of instant coffee. I couldn't taste either. My mind was somewhere else entirely. I couldn't stop thinking about the look on my mother's face, that flat, cold recognition, the way she saw me not as a daughter, not even as a traitor, but as a problem that had gotten too loud to ignore. And then my father's words, she's old anyway. They weren't just cruel, they were casual. Like Grandma's life had already expired in their minds. Like they were just waiting for the paperwork to catch up. That was when something changed in me. Not the anger I'd been carrying that for years, tucked behind polite smiles and short phone calls. No, this was sharper. Resolve. They wanted to pretend this could be buried, that the instruments were the only evidence, and now that they'd been recovered, everything could go back to normal. They had no idea what was coming. Later that night, after Grandma fell asleep again, I borrowed a laptop from the nurse's station, just for a few hours. They said, I thanked them. I sat in the quiet cafeteria, fluorescent lights buzzing above me, and pulled up the insurance claim portal. I still had access to my parents' email, They never changed the password. I knew I shouldn't have looked, but I did. And there it was. A copy of the signed claim, dated the day after the instruments disappeared, attached a police report number, a full statement, and one scanned document that made my stomach drop. A valuation sheet. Every item listed, estimated at over $82,000 total. My grandma's life's work reduced to a spreadsheet with rows, columns, and price tags. But it wasn't just the numbers. In the notes section, someone had typed property presumed stolen during emergency hospitalization. No surviving relatives had access to locked room. I knew that handwriting. It was my dad's. I closed the laptop, and I knew what I had to do. The next day, I walked into a lawyer's office. Not a high-rise downtown place, a small strip mall office with faded carpet, and a receptionist named Angela, who offered me a peppermint before I sat down. The lawyer, Mr. Corwin, listened as I told him everything. I expected disbelief, hesitation, maybe even judgment. But when I finished, he just leaned back, folded his hands, and said, "Do you have documentation?" "I have a copy of the insurance claim, access logs, time-stamped emails, and a police report confirming the instruments were found in their home." He nodded slowly. "That's substantial. Can I press charges?" He paused. "Technically, you won't be the one pressing charges, but you can give testimony. The fraud claim, if proven, is felony level. And elder financial exploitation, especially with evidence that it caused a medical decline, is taken seriously." I swallowed hard. Will they go to jail? Depends. But, at the very least, they won't walk away quietly. That night, I wrote an email. Not to them, to myself. Subject line: "You chose truth over family lies." Inside, I wrote everything I couldn't say out loud. About feeling like the second child, the invisible one. About watching my sister get applause while I got silence. About the years of being told I was too sensitive, too much, too needy. About loving my family and still choosing to stop lying for them. I ended it with one sentence. You don't have to make yourself smaller just to fit into their version of peace. I scheduled it to send to myself a year from now, just to see if I'd still believe it. The next week blurred into hearings and phone calls. I gave my statement to the detective on the case. Confirmed timelines, forwarded documents. And through it all, they stayed quiet. No more calls, no more voicemails, just silence. Except Vivian. She popped up again, this time in a group chat with cousins I hadn't spoken to in months. She posted a link, a GoFundMe, for my parents. Help David and Sandra Carter recover from a devastating misunderstanding that tore their family apart. Misunderstanding. That word hit harder than I expected. Like everything I'd said was just a glitch, a small error in the system of their reputation, something to be smoothed over with pity and shares. I didn't respond. But one cousin Amy messaged me privately. "I'm with you. Grandma deserves better. Let me know if you need anything." It was a small thing, but it mattered. Because it meant I wasn't imagining this. I wasn't the problem. And I wasn't alone. The final hearing was scheduled for the following month. I didn't plan to attend in person. But then Grandma asked me, voice hoarse but steady, "Will you be there when they speak?" I hesitated. "Not for them," she added. "For me." I nodded. And so I went. But nothing prepared me for what they'd say in that courtroom. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not physically, though. The AC was definitely on blast, but emotionally. Like the walls had heard too many stories like mine to react anymore. Just another day. Another broken family. Another pair of people in pressed suits, trying to look respectable while denying everything. My name had been called already. I'd given my statement. Quiet. Calm. Facts only. No tears, no dramatics. Just the truth. The instruments. the room, the insurance claim, the dates, the emails, the damage. I told the court about the night I found them and the sound of my grandma crying through the phone when she thought everything was gone. I didn't need to explain how much that moment had hollowed me out. I had the police report, the photos, the voice recording from the 911 call. The judge listened. And then it was their turn. Mom and Dad stepped up to the podium like they were about to give a presentation at a school board meeting, dressed like respectable people do in court. Mom in a cream blazer, Dad in a navy blue suit that still had the tag crease down the sleeve. And then Mom started speaking. "Your Honor," she said, voice perfectly measured, "we want to start by saying we're sorry for any confusion that may have occurred. It was never our intention to mislead anyone." Confusion. That word again. Dad picked up next. When the instruments were reported missing, we were under the impression they had genuinely been stolen. It was only later, during the stress of the situation, that we realized a miscommunication had happened. A miscommunication. The audience, the courtroom, stayed silent, but I could hear the way the prosecutor's pen stopped mid-note. Then Mom turned toward the judge again. Her voice softened. "But what's really heartbreaking is that this has become a matter of family betrayal. Our daughter, Rami, has always been a sensitive soul. She's an artist. Sometimes emotions cloud facts." That one hit me right in the ribs. Like I was unstable, emotional, unreliable. They didn't deny what they did. They reframed it, twisted it, painted me as the problem in my own story. "We never meant to hurt her grandmother," Dad added, looking sincerely pained. "We just didn't think she'd even be able to play those instruments again. We thought it was time to think about the legacy. For everyone." The judge asked one question. "Were you aware, at the time of filing the insurance claim, that the instruments were still inside your residence?" Dad blinked. Then Mom stepped in. "We weren't sure. Everything was happening so fast. There was a lot of emotional stress." The judge nodded, slowly, then turned to the prosecutor. "Any rebuttal?" And that's when it happened. The prosecutor didn't say a word. She just pressed a button. And on the screen behind the witness stand, an email appeared, dated 2 days after the insurance claim, sent from Dad's email to Mom's. "Let's leave them in the upstairs room for now. Rami's too scared to push, and her grandmother won't be back for at least a few more days. We'll figure out the paperwork later." The courtroom held its breath. Dad's face went pale. Mom looked at him like she wanted to vanish. The prosecutor let the silence sit. Then she said, evenly, "This email was recovered from the defendant's shared cloud storage, which had no two-factor protection. It directly contradicts their claim of confusion." That was the moment. The exact second their performance collapsed. No more sensitive artist. No more stressful miscommunication. Just truth. Ugly, documented, time-stamped truth. I didn't smile, didn't cry. Just watched. Watched them shrink in real time. The judge leaned back, steepled his fingers, and said, "Given the nature of the evidence, we'll be proceeding to sentencing." Mom sat down with a thud. Dad followed, eyes on the floor. They didn't look at me. They didn't dare. When court adjourned for the day, I stepped out into the hallway, trying to breathe. The air outside the courtroom wasn't much warmer, but at least it wasn't stale. Grandma wasn't there. I had told her to stay home. Too much stress, too much pain. But when I pulled out my phone, I saw a message from her. "Whatever happens in that room, know this. You stood up for me, and I'm still here. I love you." I didn't realize I was crying until someone handed me a tissue. A stranger. Maybe another witness in another case. I never got her name. But I'll never forget the way she said, "Some truths take everything to say, but they give everything back." I nodded, whispering, "Thank you." That night, I returned to Grandma's house. Not mine, Not theirs, just hers. And for the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. But in the morning, I woke up to something that made my stomach twist all over again. Vivian had posted,
"New profile picture."
Caption: "Sometimes silence is grace. Sometimes family is complicated. I'm choosing healing." Comments disabled. Likes turned off. And right under that, a picture of her holding one of the mandolins, the same one that had been taken into police custody. I stared at the photo for a long time. Vivian, perfectly posed, standing in front of a softly blurred bookshelf, holding the mandolin like it had always been hers. The caption wasn't aggressive. It wasn't even directed at me. But the symbolism hit hard. She had taken something sacred, again, and made it decorative. A trophy. I refreshed the post. Still no comments. Still no likes. Just silence. But I wasn't silent. I opened my messages, typed fast. "Where did you get that mandolin?" No answer. 10 minutes passed. Then she texted back, "Relax. I just borrowed it for a photo. One of Dad's friends said the case might be dismissed. It's all being worked out." Worked out. That phrase curled in my gut like spoiled milk. This wasn't over, and it wasn't handled. It was being spun, contained, rewritten. I called the case officer. She picked up on the second ring. "Detective Sanders," she said. "It's Raimi Carter. I just saw a photo. My sister has one of the instruments. The mandolin. She posted it online." There was a pause. Papers shuffled. "That's not possible," Sanders said. "The collection is still under evidence hold. Nothing has been released." "Then someone got access," I said, "illegally." A longer pause this time.
"I'll look into it immediately."
And she did? Because less than 24 hours later, I got the update. One of the evidence clerks, an old friend of my father's, had accessed the storage room. The log entry was vague. The camera feed had a 3-minute blackout. Maintenance issue, they said. But someone had walked in and walked out with a case. They didn't know which one. But I did. Vivian had always wanted things she didn't understand. And this time, she got it through someone else's crime. I sent the screenshot of her post to the detective. Time-stamped. Geotagged. The next morning, the mandolin was quietly returned. No note, no apology. Just left at the precinct in a shopping bag from a high-end boutique. Because, of course, the judge was notified. The clerk was suspended pending investigation. And Vivian, she deleted the post. Vanished again. No statement, no public fallout. Just another disappearance behind a curated wall of healing. But the timing was poetic. Because that same week, the court issued its final sentence. My parents pled guilty. Felony insurance fraud. Elder financial exploitation. Sentenced to 1 year of house arrest. 400 hours of community service. And worst of all for them, everything was made public. The local newspaper ran a story, just a few paragraphs, titled "Former PTA Couple Sentenced for Insurance Fraud in Elder Abuse Case." Their names were there. So was mine. I'd asked the court not to redact it. They didn't deserve the protection of my silence anymore. For the next few weeks, I heard whispers. From neighbors who used to wave. From distant cousins who sent cautious texts. From former teachers who messaged me on Facebook saying, "I always knew you were stronger than people gave you credit for." It was nice. Strange, but nice. But I wasn't doing it for their approval. I was doing it for Grandma. Because the day after the sentencing, I brought her home. No tubes. No machines. Just her cardigan with the pearl buttons, a warm blanket, and sunlight on the porch. The instruments were returned to her. No longer evidence. No longer shame. Just hers. And we celebrated her 90th birthday that weekend. Small gathering. Close friends. A few of her former music students showed up with their kids. They brought flowers, cookies, old recital photos. And when the afternoon light poured through the windows just right, Grandma walked over to the piano, didn't say a word, just sat and played. Not a full piece,
Just a melody.
enough to tighten every chest in the room, enough to make your throat close up, even if you didn't know why. She played like nothing had been taken from her, like no one had tried to bury her legacy. And when she finished, one of her oldest friends clapped and said, "90 looks good on you." Grandma smiled and replied, "Might have another decade in me, if nobody tries to kill me again." The room burst into laughter. But I didn't, because I believed her. And because laughter couldn't drown out what I saw in her eyes. Fire, undimmed, dignity, unshaken, music, still hers. Later that night, I stood in the hallway alone, looking at the cello case, the same one I found in the dark, under a tarp, in a locked room. And for the first time, I didn't see guilt. I saw endurance, the kind that survives silence, that outlives betrayal. And I knew then, this story wasn't just about justice. It was about legacy, and the cost of protecting it. But just when I thought the worst was behind me, my phone buzzed. One new message. No name. Just a number I didn't recognize. "You're welcome." I stared at the message for a long time. "You're welcome." No name, just a number with no contact photo. Area code from our county. At first, I thought it was spam, or maybe some anonymous troll looking for attention. But something about the timing, the smug finality of those two words, it didn't feel random. I called the number.
Straight to voicemail. No name, no greeting. Just that generic robotic woman saying, "Please leave your message after the tone."
I hung up. Then I opened my laptop. I'd saved every screenshot, every document, every email, every call log from the past 6 months. Just in case, I cross-referenced the number with the files. Nothing. Then I checked the cloud logs from when the insurance email was leaked in court. There it was. The same number had requested a password reset for my dad's cloud storage 3 weeks before the trial. My jaw clenched. It wasn't me. It wasn't law enforcement. It wasn't a random breach. Whoever sent me that message had been watching. And helping? I texted back, "Who is this?" No reply. The silence said enough. Whoever they were, they didn't want credit. Just closure. I could have obsessed over it. Could have chased IP addresses, run searches, even hired someone. But I didn't. Because the truth was, this story wasn't theirs to finish.
It was mine.
The week after Grandma's birthday, I finally sat down to write a letter. Not to my parents. Not to Vivian. To myself. I opened a blank document, titled it the same way I had months ago. You chose truth over family lies. But this time, I wasn't writing to justify my actions. I was writing to understand them. I wrote about the girl who used to sit outside her sister's bedroom door, listening to praise that never came her way. About the teenager who asked for help buying a used textbook and was met with, "We wish we could, sweetie," while Vivian flew to Florence. About the young woman who learned to play Bach before she could ride a bike, and still had to earn every drop of acknowledgement. And I wrote about the version of me who stood outside my childhood home in the middle of the night, with my hands shaking, and still called 911 anyway. Because she deserved to be remembered.
At the end of the letter, I wrote,
The truth didn't set me free. It isolated me. It cost me blood ties. But it gave me something bigger. It gave me a voice I didn't have to borrow. I printed it, folded it once, and tucked it into the back of my journal right next to the only photo I still kept of the 4 of us. Not because I wanted to remember how we looked, but because I needed to remember how far I'd come. Since the trial, I haven't seen them. Mom and Dad still serve out their house arrest sentence. They wear ankle monitors now. They walk their trash to the curb at 6 a.m. sharp. They do food bank shifts where no one speaks to them. Their world got smaller. Their circle vanished. The family name tainted. Vivian went dark again. Last I heard, she withdrew her grad school applications, said she needed time to reconnect with her values. She didn't say which ones. Her new bio on social. Still healing, still growing, but not a single post about Grandma. Not one. And that's all I needed to know. As for me, I stayed in Madison longer than I thought I would. Found a part-time job at a local music school. Started teaching beginners. Little kids who tap the piano keys like they're saying hello to each note. It's not glamorous. It's not headline-worthy. But it feels right. Last week, I brought Grandma to a recital. One of my students, a 7-year-old with a wild braid and nervous fingers, played Twinkle Twinkle on a violin that used to sit in a locked glass cabinet. Grandma held her hand over her heart the whole time. When the last note rang out, she turned to me and whispered, "You brought the music back." I didn't reply, just held her hand and nodded. Because that was the point all along. Not revenge, not punishment, but restoration. Legacy doesn't live in courtrooms or news headlines. It lives in what we pass on without needing to own it. And sometimes, it lives in the silence that follows a note well played. As we walked back to the car, Grandma stopped under a patch of golden evening light. Her shadow fell long behind her. Her steps were slower now, more careful, but her back was still straight. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly. I thought about it. About the family dinners that would never happen again. About the birthdays that would go unanswered. About the questions I still carried. And then I looked at her, alive, whole, holding my arm with a grip that still meant something. "No," I said. And I meant it. Because the truth doesn't always make things easier, but it always makes them real. And I'll take real every time. So, if you've made it this far, I want to ask you, did I go too far or not far enough? Was I brave or just loud? Comment below. I'm listening. And if no one else has said it to you today, your voice matters. Don't let anyone mute you just because they gave you your last name. I'm Raimi Carter, and this was my story. Thank you for hearing it. The music has returned, and for us, that's enough.